My name is Clara Bennett. I am 58 years old, and for the past 20 years, I've worked as a senior executive at a multinational company in Seattle. To most people, I'm just another quiet woman who keeps to herself. They see the small apartment, the old car, the modest clothes, and assume I live an ordinary life. What they don't see are the contracts I sign, the departments I run, or the lives I've built through sheer determination. I've never needed to show what I have. I just needed to live peacefully. My son Lucas doesn't know everything about me. He knows I work in an office that I'm comfortable, but he's never seen the numbers or the scale of what I do. I wanted him to grow up without depending on money, to understand that success means nothing if it costs your character. When he got married to Samantha Reynolds 3 years ago, I saw how much he wanted to fit into a world of luxury, noise, and people who talk too loudly about their wealth. One Tuesday evening while I was finishing up a report, Lucas called. His voice sounded tight, polite, almost formal. Mom, Samantha's parents are visiting from New York. They'd love to meet you. We're having dinner at Lame in downtown this Saturday. Something in his tone made me pause. It wasn't excitement, it was nervousness. I asked, do they know anything about me? There was a short silence before he said, I told them you work in an office and that you like simple things. Simple. That word lingered in my mind long after we hung up. My son, the boy I raised to see value beyond appearances, now feared I might not look impressive enough. That night, as rain droomed softly against my window, I made a decision. I would meet them exactly as they expected me to be, plain, unremarkable, and visible. I didn't want revenge, I wanted truth. I wanted to see how they treated someone they believed had nothing to offer. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted my son to remember who taught him what real worth means. Saturday arrived wrapped in gray clouds and drizzle, the kind of quiet rain that seems to wash everything clean. I woke early, brewed coffee, and stood before my closet. Rows of tailored suits hung beside plain sweaters and faded dresses. My hand reached for a simple navy one, soft from years of wear. It wasn't elegant, but it was honest. I tied my hair back, slipped on old flats, and looked in the mirror. The reflection staring back wasn't the executive who managed millions. She was just a woman, ordinary, unnoticed, and perfect for tonight. The taxi ride downtown was slow, the city shimmering through the rain. I watched as couples hurried under umbrellas. People ducked into warm cafes, and the lights of Seattle began to glow against the wet streets. When the driver asked if I was meeting someone special, I smiled faintly. Something like that. Lameson was already buzzing when I arrived. Waiters moved gracefully between tables. Lauder floated over clinking glasses, and the air smelled of rosemary and expensive wine. Lucas stood near the entrance, checking his watch. His face softened when he saw me, though his eyes carried a flicker of concern. Mom, you look nice, he said, his voice tight with politeness. Samantha greeted me with a brief hug, careful not to wrinkle her dress. So glad you could make it, Mrs. Bennett. Her tone was kind but distant. Then came her parents, Veronica and Charles Reynolds. They were exactly as I imagined, elegant, confident, and used to being admired. Veronica's diamonds sparkled as she offered her hand, her smile smooth and practiced. It's such a pleasure to meet you, she said. Samantha tells us you live quite simply. I nodded, matching her smile. Simplicity suits me. As we sat down, for the conversation flowed easily on their side. They spoke of vacations, art galleries, and renovations on their third home. When they turned to me, the questions were sharp and polite, like needles wrapped in silk. Do you manage to cover your bills alone? It must be hard living by yourself. I answered each one with calm politeness. Then Veronica leaned and slightly voiced syrupy sweet. Lucas has such a generous heart. If you ever need help financially, dear, we'd be happy to assist. Maybe a small allowance each month. I looked at her, smiling gently. How thoughtful, I said. Inside, I could feel the first stirrings of something deeper, quiet, steady, and waiting. For a moment no one spoke. The air between us felt heavy, almost fragile. Lucas lowered his eyes, shame flickering across his face. Samantha shifted uncomfortably, her fingers tracing the edge of her napkin. Veronica's smile remained, but her tone softened as if she were speaking to a child. We just want to make things easier for you, Clara. Perhaps $700 a month, just enough to help with expenses. Lucas and Samantha shouldn't have to worry. I set my fork down quietly and looked at her. The $700, I repeated as if tasting the number. To make things easier. She nodded, clearly pleased that I hadn't taken offense. Yes, dear. We know how difficult it must be to manage on your own. Across the table, Charles added, We're fortunate and we believe in helping those who have less. Those who have less. The words landed softly, but they cut deep. I looked at my son, my boy, who once beamed with pride every time I achieved something, who now sat silently, letting others decide my worth. I smiled. That's very kind, I said. Then I leaned back slightly. Out of curiosity, how much did you contribute to their home? Veronica blinked, surprised by the question. Oh, the 40,000 for the down payment and 15 for the honeymoon. Paris, of course. I nodded slowly. The 55,000. That's about what I make in a single month. The table froze. Charles frowned. I'm sorry, I said. I continued evenly. That's about my monthly income. I'm a regional director at Titan Technologies. I manage operations across 5 states. The people I work with don't measure character in dollars. The color drained from Veronica's face. Samantha's eyes widened. Lucas whispered, Mom. I looked at him gently. You didn't lie, son. You just forgot that simplicity isn't the same as lack. I reached into my bag and took out my corporate card, placing it on the table. Dinner's on me, I said softly. Consider it a courtesy from the woman you thought needed your charity. The waiter appeared, unsure as the entire table sat in stunned silence. For the first time all evening, I didn't feel small. I felt seen outside. The rain had softened into a fine mist. I stepped out of the restaurant before anyone could follow. The chill air brushing against my face, like a quiet applause from the night itself. My breath came steady, unshaken. I hadn't raised my voice, hadn't humiliated anyone, but somehow the truth had done it for me. The valet offered to call a cab. I nodded, thanking him with a small smile. A few moments later, a yellow taxi pulled up, headlights cutting through the fog. I slid into the back seat, exhaling slowly as the city lights blurred past the window. The driver was an older man, his eyes kind behind the rearview mirror. Rough night? He asked. Not rough, I said after a pause. Just revealing, he chuckled softly. That's usually how it goes with family dinners. I smiled. You're not wrong. For a while we rode in silence, the sound of the wipers filling the quiet. Then he spoke again. You look like someone who just told the truth and feels lighter for it. His words caught me off guard, but I laughed quietly. You have a sharp eye. He shrugged. I see all kinds of people in this seat. The ones who talk loud about what they have usually look the emptiest when they get out. I nodded. Richness isn't about noise. It's about peace. He grinned at me through the mirror. You must be very rich. Then I looked out the window at the shimmering city, reflections of neon lights dancing on the wet pavement, strangers hurrying beneath umbrellas. The hum of life carrying on. For the first time in a long time, I felt an easy calm spreading through my chest. When the cab stopped in front of my apartment building, I paid the fare and added a tip. The driver smiled. Take care, Mom. As I stepped out, for the drizzle kissed my face again. I lifted my chin, breathing in the cool air. Tonight hadn't been about revenge. It had been about remembering who I was, and knowing I'd never need to prove it again. The next morning, the city was quiet, washed clean by rain. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, falling across my small kitchen table. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down, replaying the previous night in my mind. There was no anger, no satisfaction, just peace. The kind that comes when truth has finally spoken for itself. My phone buzzed. It was Lucas. For a moment, I considered letting it ring, but something in me wanted to hear his voice. I answered, Mom. He began, his tone unsteady. I'm so sorry for what happened last night. I didn't interrupt. He continued. After you left, they tried to justify themselves, saying they were just being kind, but I couldn't listen. I told them everything, what you've done, what you've achieved. They were shocked, and I told them they owed you respect, not pity. I stayed silent, letting him speak. Then his voice broke a little. Samantha cried. She said she never realized how much she sounded like her mother. She wants to come see you to apologize. I took a slow breath. Apologies are easy, Lucas. Change takes courage, I know, he said softly. But I think she means it, and I want to be better too. There was a long pause. Then he whispered, Mom, I was embarrassed last night. Not by you, but by myself. I forgot who raised me. My heart acted his words, but I smiled. You forgot for a moment, that's all. Remembering is what matters. He exhaled, relief in his voice. I love you, Mom. I love you too, Lucas, I said quietly. But don't say it just to feel better. Live it. After we hung up, I sat by the window, watching the light dance on the wet street below. A group of children ran through puddles, their laughter echoing faintly. Life, I thought, has a way of humbling everyone. Some through loss, others through truth, and maybe last night had been both for my son. 3 days later, for I heard a soft knock on my door. When I opened it, Samantha stood there holding a small bouquet of daisies. No makeup, no expensive clothes, just a simple beige sweater and jeans. For the first time, she looked like herself, not a reflection of someone else's expectations. "Mrs. Bennet," she said softly. "May I come in?" I stepped aside, of course. She walked in slowly, her eyes tracing the small apartment, the worn armchair, the books stacked neatly on the table, for the faint smell of fresh coffee. "It's cozy," she said, almost surprised. "Peaceful." I smiled. "That's what I like about it." She set the flowers on the counter, her hands trembling slightly. "I came to apologize," she said, her voice unsteady, "for the way I treated you and for what I allowed my parents to say. I grew up thinking money defined respect. I didn't realize how wrong that was until I saw you last night." Calm, proud, unshaken. I watched her carefully. "It's not easy to unlearn what you were taught," I said. "But it's brave to start." Tears filled her eyes. "I want to change. I don't want to be like them. I don't want Lucas to be ashamed of kindness or simplicity." I nodded. "Then begin by listening more than you speak, and by valuing people for who they are, not what they own. The rest will follow." Samantha took a deep breath and looked around the room again. "I see now why Lucas loves coming here. It feels safe." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was healing. Then she said softly, "I hope one day you'll forgive me." I smiled gently. "Forgiveness doesn't need time, only understanding. You've already earned it." When she left, she hugged me. Genuine, warm, real. I watched her walk down the hallway lighter than when she arrived. As I closed the door, I whispered to myself, maybe tonight I wasn't the only one who found peace. Weeks passed and life settled into a quiet rhythm again. Lucas and Samantha began visiting every Sunday. Sometimes they brought groceries, sometimes just laughter and stories. There were no more awkward silences, no careful performances. It felt natural, like family should. Samantha had changed more than I could have imagined. She no longer wore the mask of perfection. She talked openly about her work, her mistakes, her plans, and every time she laughed, it sounded freer, lighter. One afternoon as we cooked together, she said, "You know, Mrs. Bennet, I used to think happiness was expensive." I smiled. "And now," she stirred the soup thoughtfully, "now I think it's just quiet." I nodded. "Peace is the one luxury most people can't afford because they don't know it's free." Lucas joined us, placing fresh bread on the table. "You two sound like philosophers," he teased. "Just women who've learned a few lessons," I replied. After lunch, we sat by the window watching the light fade over the city. The air smelled faintly of rain, and for the first time Samantha reached for my hand. "Thank you," she said simply, "for not giving up on me." I squeezed her fingers gently. We all stumble when we confuse wealth with worth. The key is to recognize the fall and get up wiser. She nodded, smiling through glassy eyes. "I'm learning later." As they prepared to leave, Lucas hugged me tightly. "Mom, I used to think your silence meant you didn't care. Now I know it meant you were stronger than any of us." I smiled at him. "Silence isn't weakness, son. It's power under control." When the door closed behind them, the apartment was quiet again, but this time it didn't feel empty. I looked around at the little space I'd built, filled not with things, but with calm. I realized that life doesn't reward the loudest voices. It rewards the ones that stay true when no one's watching. And that truth, I thought, was worth more than all the riches in the world. Months later, the rhythm of my days changed again. I began mentoring younger women at work, single mothers, fresh graduates, women who doubted their own strength. Every week, they'd gather in the small conference room I'd reserved after hours. We'd talk about leadership, balance, and the quiet power of integrity. One evening, a young woman named Grace asked me, "Mrs. Bennet, how did you stay strong when people underestimated you?" I smiled. "By remembering that what others think of you says more about them than about you, and by never confusing wealth with worth." She nodded slowly, her eyes bright. I could see a reflection of my younger self in her, hopeful, uncertain, determined to rise. That night, after everyone left, I stayed in the office for a while. The city glowed outside my window. Soft silver light over the water. 1,000 stories unfolding in every direction. I thought about the night at La Mason, about Veronica's envelope, Lucas's apology, Samantha's tears. None of it hurt anymore. It had all become something else. A lesson. A turning point. A quiet beginning. When I finally went home, I brewed tea and opened my journal. The same one I'd written in the night after that dinner. I flipped to a new page and wrote, "Real power isn't loud. It doesn't need to announce itself. It stands still when others perform. It listens when others brag. And it forgives when others don't know how. I closed the journal and looked around my apartment. Everything I owned fit into this space. Yet, it felt abundant. Not because of what was here, but because of what wasn't. Fear, noise, pretense. I walked to the window, the cool air brushing my face. Down on the street, people hurried home, carrying groceries, holding hands, living ordinary lives. I smiled. Wealth, I thought, isn't about what fills your house. It's about what fills your heart. And as the lights of Seattle shimmered against the night sky, I knew the truth that had carried me all along. Money fades, dignity doesn't.